What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Today we'll be going over my favorite tight ends to draft this season, and we'll be going over different sections of the draft. So I've got some early, middle, and late options for you to cover whatever draft strategy you prefer. As always, let me know which tight ends you agree with or disagree with in the comment section down below. And if you want to add to my list, you think there are names that I left off that you love, that's the place to do it as well. So let's get things started off as usual, the stat of the day. Yesterday's stat was who led the league in punt return yards last season. The answer is Gunnar Olszewski, potentially the Patriots slot receiver this season. Chase Johnson was the first to get that right on YouTube, and at Jazz Sleepy was the first to get that right on Twitter. Today's stat: what running back had the most receptions inside the 10-yard line last season? All right, let's talk about some tight ends. And first up, we've got to go over the top three, which is obviously Kelce, Kittle, and Waller. In terms of ADP, Kelce has risen all the way up to 8th overall. Waller's coming in at 23rd overall, and then Kittle is 26th overall. So those two right there are basically going, late second, early third round turn, and I've seen that order flip. So it's definitely not locked in that everyone's taking Waller or everyone's taking Kittle. They're flip-flopping a lot. But Kelce obviously is the one you would want, but he goes off the board way earlier. I mean, in terms of value, I don't think I can give him the win here. Like, if we're trying to decide, which is basically what I'm doing right now, is trying to decide among the top three, who is the best value, who's the one that I'd want to target the most. It used to be Kelce when he was coming off the board as like a late, I guess he was never a late second round pick, but like a mid second round pick to an early second round pick. I love that because you could pair him with a first round pick. That was incredible value. You were getting him at like the end of the elite running backs. Some elite wide receivers were off the board, but at 8th overall, that is very, very aggressive. There's a very high opportunity cost there. Obviously, he's such a difference maker that it's still a perfectly fine pick. I think I have him ranked, I'm not sure it's 8th, but it's probably around that like 8, 9, 10 range. So I think that's a good pick. But in terms of the best value, I do think it's very, very close. And as I said, what would that be? I think yesterday's video, I'm doing the breakdown. So, we do the Thursday breakdown videos. I'm doing Kittle versus Waller, maybe not next week, but probably the week after that, as far as like a full in-depth breakdown on who you should draft between those two. But as of right now, before doing that breakdown, I prefer Darren Waller. Kittle is just an absolute freak, and I would love to get him on my team. But if I'm choosing between these two, the 49ers are going to be a lower volume passing offense. That's pretty much confirmed. They are going to have a rookie quarterback. Maybe he doesn't start the season, but I think he's going to play a lot of games this season. So you've got a rookie in there. The 49ers definitely have a much better wide receiver core. Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel are really, really good. And so they're going to take target share away from Kittle. If you look at Waller, on the other hand, I mean, he is the clear lead guy in terms of targets in this Raiders offense. He had 145 targets last season, which tied Kelce for 6th among all players, not just tight ends, all players. And he turned those targets into 107 receptions for just under 1,200 yards and 9 touchdowns. That is dominant. And if we look at the Raiders offense, he's just so clearly the top guy. I mean, Aguilar's gone. He was second in targets last season with 82, so that's off the board. That was 63 behind Waller, but he's gone. Then Hunter Renfrow is next, but he's just a slot receiver. His targets can only get so high, and he had 77 last year. I wouldn't expect a huge hike from there. And then it's Jacobs with 45. I mean, obviously Drake coming in is going to reduce some of those. Maybe the running backs get more in total, but I feel like you get the picture. We're already in the 40s, right? Like, he had 145 targets last season, so he's going to be a target monster. He's probably going to be around 100 receptions. If you want to take him late second round, it's awesome because you've got that top 5 running back, and you pair him with your choice of a great wide receiver or another awesome running back. Maybe like one of the last elite running backs is still on the board. You get 2 elite running backs with Darren Waller, and you just hammer out wide receivers after that. Or maybe there's a stud wide receiver on the board and you've started off with potentially The best tight end, I mean, I'm saying potentially because there's like 4 or 5 tight ends that can realistically finish first. So one of the best tight ends, but definitely a top 3 tight end, a top 5 running back, and elite wide receiver. And now you're balanced to begin your draft. You can target whatever position is of value in the next round, next few rounds. I mean, it's such a great area to target him in. So I hope he doesn't climb into like the mid-second, the early second. That would be aggressive. I still like a lot of those running backs ahead of him. But as a late second round or an early third round pick, Darren Waller this season, a lot of upside. And again, I still love Kittle. But I think I'm only taking Kittle if Waller's off the board because I do prefer Darren Waller. Next up, we've got Tyler Higbee. You have heard plenty by now my love for this Rams offense, but most of the pieces are still expensive, right? So even if you're targeting this team, you might not get Cam Akers. You might not be able to get Robert Woods or Cooper Kupp. And since I've mentioned wanting a Rams player on every single one of my teams, the next most logical spot to look is at tight end with Tyler Higbee. As of recording this, he's coming off the board in about the 8th round, which I think is a great spot to get him because the opportunity cost is so low. So we talk about Kelsey to start this, right? The opportunity cost is massive because there are so many awesome players on the board when he goes off that you're skipping out on them to take him. What is the opportunity cost of an 8th round tight end? Running back value has just dropped off a cliff. There are no more elite wide receivers. There are very few wide receivers with a ton of upside left. And so realistically, there were fringe options anyway. So why not take a chance on tight end? Because even looking at quarterback, I mean, all the elite quarterbacks go off the board in like the 5th, 6th, and 7th round. Once you enter the 8th round, you're kind of looking more into the 10th or the 12th round at some quarterbacks. It's kind of like a dead zone at quarterback as well. And so when you enter these ranges where you're like, don't want running back, the wide receivers are like, okay, but nothing's really separating them from guys 2-3 rounds later. Same thing for quarterback. Why not take a tight end? So you hear me talk all the time about wanting those 3 guys and then waiting, but it's waiting for a value. Wait for someone to be, a half a round back from where their ADP is and take them. Or wait for a range that you hate everything else. Why not take tight end? So taking Higbee, it really doesn't hurt you very much. And it does come with a lot of upside. Like he was fine last season. Final stat line was like 44 receptions, a little over 500 yards and 5 touchdowns through 15 weeks. So that's going to be around tight end 20, 21 in points per game. But his issues there were twofold. I mean, one, Goff is bad, as you've heard me say a number of times. And so the upgrade to Stafford is going to help him there. But more importantly, he was sharing the field with Jared Everett, right? And so if Everett is getting, 62 targets, well, how are you going to be productive in fantasy if you're splitting targets with someone else? Like, tight ends already do basically nothing, right? And so anyone with a pulse is valuable. So splitting the field, it really, really hurts your value. This season, Everett is on Seattle, and so his only real competition at tight end is Jacob Harris. Harris is an athletic freak. He is fantastic in the receiving game. So if he starts to get hype this summer, then I will be reevaluating the Tyler Higbee take. But he's also a rookie tight end. He didn't do all that much in college, and he's still very, very raw. So he is the type of player that we expect could have a really good career, but it's probably not going to come for a few seasons. He probably still needs to develop. Now, I say probably because we have no idea. I mean, he could develop very quickly. But the odds are Harris needs a little bit more time to develop, and so Higbee should be the very clear best tight end on their roster. And if we think back to 2019, when Everett was injured, he closed the season with at least 7 receptions in each of the last 5 weeks. He had over 100 yards in 4 of his last 5. Like, tight ends don't do that, or at least very, very few tight ends do that. It's basically only that elite trio. So the fact that he's even capable of that gives me confidence. Now, I don't think he's a lock, and I don't think any player, though, is a lock in these later rounds. If you think anyone is, you're probably being a little bit overconfident. But Higbee is one of the few tight ends that actually has a ceiling, so I'm willing to spend an 8th round pick for that chance at a ceiling. Another tight end I like in a very close range is Dallas Goedert. Now, Goedert will be entering his 4th season at age 26, and he might finally have the role to himself this season. He'll need Ertz to be traded away, but that seems very likely to happen at this point. Just know that if you're watching this, a few weeks after it was uploaded, and Ertz is staying on the Eagles, then Dallas is like a fine pick, but the upside would definitely not be as high. He should be going later in drafts than he is right now if that's the case. But it does seem like Ertz is going to be traded away, and so I'm very interested in Goedert. Last season, he was only healthy enough to play in 10 games if you exclude his 6 snaps before getting hurt in week 3. But during those weeks, he saw 6.4 targets per game. That's solid. He had tight end 1 production in 4 to 10 weeks, so not amazing, but not bad either. And similar to Higbee, he was sharing the field. So again, even if Ertz was dreadful last season, he commanded 72 targets, but he barely caught any of them, okay? And he was just awful in terms of efficiency, but it doesn't matter. He had 72 targets. That's a lot of targets being taken away from Dallas Goedert. And so even though he was bad with them, any targets being taken away is a very, very bad thing for a tight end because they don't get very many targets to begin with. And if we look at the 4 games that Goedert was healthy last season and Ertz missed, he was decent. The first game he only had 1 reception, but he was returning from injury, and so we didn't have that great of expectations for him. Then after that, 4 for 33 and no touchdowns, not great. But then 5 for 77 and a touchdown, 7 for 75 and a touchdown. So again, not lighting the world on fire, but those are quality receiving numbers for a tight end. You can't be expecting a guy to post consistently 90 receiving yards at tight end in this range of the draft. It's basically the top 3 and maybe Kyle Pitts. Who knows what's going to happen with that situation. But I think the point is, if Ertz is gone, Dallas Goedert is very clearly going to be a big part of that passing offense. It's an offense that we expect to get a little bit better now that Carson Wentz is gone. And he was 10th in points per game last season. So even if he doesn't perform all that much better, you're not drafting a bust here, right? Even if Ertz stays and they don't improve that much in the passing game, he's probably still going to be a low-end tight end 1, so you won't be pumped about that, taking him as the 7th tight end off the board, but I think the chance to capture that sort of upside makes it worth it. If you miss out on tight end early, and then you miss out on these 2, you don't like anyone else, I am willing to take a shot on Adam Trautman in the last rounds of my draft. He was a very highly rated prospect last season, but of course, rookie tight ends don't do very much, and so his season wasn't great. He was only able to bring in 15 receptions, 171 yards, and 1 touchdown behind Jared Cook, who had 37 receptions for over 500 yards and 7 touchdowns. But Cook is on the Chargers now, and so Trautman's only real competition is Nick Vannett, who is no threat whatsoever. Trautman is going to be the guy, and he was becoming more involved on the stretch last season. The receiving numbers were not there, but the snaps were increasing, and he only played 8 fewer snaps than Jared Cook in the playoffs. It was just that Cook was good in the receiving game, and Cook was a more established tight end. Trautman was still learning, and so they leaned on Cook more in the receiving game, even if the snaps were very close. But with Cook gone, those targets should go to Trautman, and obviously they lost Drew Brees, but they still have to throw the ball. I think that's the big point here. They'll be less efficient, but they still got to throw the football, right? And as I've said a few times in this video, it doesn't take all that much for a tight end to be valuable in fantasy. So even if he's the 4th option behind Thomas, Kamara, Traquan Smith, that'll be enough volume for him to exceed value at his late round ADP. And who knows, maybe Winston will lean on him more than we think. Maybe he'll have a lucky season with touchdowns. And maybe he's just as good as the Saints thought he was when they traded away 4 draft picks to move up and take him last season. It was a massive investment that they made into this kid, and that gives me confidence that they're willing to lean on him this season. You don't trade away 4 draft picks to move up less than a round to take a tight end, okay? Unless you're willing to use him. So I think they're invested in him, and I think he's a talented tight end. And again, Doesn't take all that much to be valuable at tight end in fantasy. So those are some tight ends that I would be trying to get in drafts. If you want to see exactly where I have these guys ranked, as well as my rankings and projections for every single player, you can check that out at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. That's the end of this one. Hope you all enjoy. If you did, then how about hitting that like button? And how about subscribing to the channel if you're new here? Thanks for watching.